Welcome to AZ Wildcats podcast. Today joining me is Yogi Roth. Yogi, what's going on, my man?
It's another week in major college football, which is always exciting. Finally, I think we're like truly in conference games. Like we don't have any of those weird, like Big 12 conference but not conference games, right? We don't have any of those games where I think will be dramatically lopsided, even all across college football. So that's I think what I'm most excited about is like finally we just get to the games that can decide like this 12-team playoff that is thankfully a part of college football in the immediate future.
Absolutely. How's the Y Option podcast going? I know I've
Yeah.
I've I've listened to it a couple times. It's great content. Congrats with that.
Yeah, well, hey, look, I see bear down behind you, and Y Option is not possible without Jim Thornby helping us bear down every single episode. It's been amazing. I mean, you know what it's like to be an entrepreneur, especially in the college football space. We really pride ourselves on being thoughtful dialogue through the lens of the West Coast. So whether we're talking about the UNLV quarterback situation in NIL or Bear Alexander, basically leaving the USC team, before they, get their first Big Ten home opener game this weekend against Wisconsin, or just kind of talking about Arizona and Utah, like we'll talk about today. But it's been fun. It's a lot. Like you're competing, you're going for it, but you also, like you do, you want to serve your audience, and you
Yeah.
want to be a trusted voice. So there's no other way than to throw down. So we'll rest like everybody after the season, but that's been fun. And then calling games, I got to say, in the Big Ten has been really cool. Like going and calling a game at Nebraska. Next week I got FC at Minnesota. Like it has been a new experience for me, and I've just decided amid this new world in college football, I was going to be entertained by it all versus be frustrated by it because I lived it in real time with the Pac-12 and everything that went on with that. So it's been a really enjoyable first month of the season. How
Yeah,
about for you, man? You having fun?
it's been pretty crazy. It's been pretty crazy.
Yeah.
It was cool. I went to K-State for a year, so I always joke around, said I was a win-win situation for me a couple weeks ago when Arizona was in Manhattan. I went out for that game, and it was really cool because the experience in Manhattan, Kansas, from every single Arizona fan, without any bias, every single Arizona fan that I spoke to said it was a tremendous experience in Manhattan, Kansas, because the people, Kansas State fans were as excited to have Arizona in the conference as Arizona was to be a part of the conference, right? And I think the feeling was definitely mutual. And so I think this early rendition of the Big 12, outside of some already pre-established rivalries like Utah and BYU, I think is going to be more of like this is pretty cool, guys, until we get to the point where, all right, I really hate that team because of the way they just dogged us out, or the way this player acted. You know how it all goes with fans. So it's been a pretty unique experience and pretty fun for us to cover. Let's get into it. Utah, Arizona, obviously a lot on the line for Arizona, more so than Utah, I think, because Utah is the established product. They've shown the consistency over the last decade to be a top tier program in the country. Arizona look like they were on the cusp of being so. And then obviously this year has not really panned out the way that I know that they would like it to have, especially just with the inconsistency. When you look at this matchup, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when it comes to these two teams?
Well, I think of the location in a night game. I've called this game at night 2 years ago when Noah Fafita and Tetero McMillan were true freshmen and playing late in the game, and Noah threw a touchdown to the left, a little fade ball to the boundary to the sideline, and you said, "Oh, that might be the future here." But at the time, that was the end, I think, of a crazy stretch for Arizona that year of like four ranked opponents, and the last one was Utah, and they just got handled pretty well in Rice-Eccles, and that place can do it for you. So that's what I think of because they're elite. To your point earlier, as a program, like they should be considered among the top teams in America. They are with their number 10 ranking, if you believe in the AP rankings. I think too, that place can swallow you at night. It just can. And how do they do it? They do it in a unique way. And by that, they do it with pressure defensively. I mean, there's going to be a time, at least for my mind, I imagine Bradley and I, Lecky Fotu, Devin Lloyd, and Julian Blackman all going up against, at the time, was a top 20 ASU team when they played at night there. Like, I have the reason I go there is that I feel like just new players at Utah, they're going to be doing the same thing. You are going to see a ton of pressure, whether it's Van Fillinger, Lander Barton, players from the secondary. And we'll see how healthy they are if Karenni Reed can go. But my thought goes to that arena in the evening in Salt Lake City and the pressure they're going to put on Noah Fifita and company. And if I'm Arizona, they have to survive the wave of the first quarter. The emotion, the excitement, the standard that they haven't met yet this year based on what they did a year ago. And that's a big deal, right? You saw the frustration on Team Mac's face walking off the field 2 weeks ago. So how do they navigate with some extra time in advance of a game that we preseason at least hyped up to be a preview of possibly the Big 12 title?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I was actually right there when T-Mac was running off the field. And he ran off the field. he did not walk off the field. He ran off the field. And listen, I can imagine his frustration was immense because the way K-State tried to play Arizona was basically to force Arizona to throw the ball to T-Mac 50 times and not let him get the big chunk plays, just keep him in front of him, and force him to beat them by themselves. And it's just not in football nature to throw the ball to one target 20, 30, 40 times, right? That just is not going to happen. So it was a little bit of an adjustment to hear Chris Kleiman say that was their goal, was to limit their production by limiting T-Mac in front of them and force the ball to go to him more than anybody else. And I'm kind of interested to see if Utah is going to take that same approach. I think the thing that I think of the most, the first thing I think of is really the run defense. Because Micah Bernard went off last week, of course, against Oklahoma State. And Arizona is actually giving up more yards on the ground at 178 than they are through the air at 175, which is pretty crazy in college football these days with spread offenses. So I'm kind of curious to see what adjustments Arizona is going to make to apply a little bit more pressure and force Isaac Wilson to throw the ball.
Yeah, Micah Bernard is such a talented player. Like he should be, and it's dramatic, but he should be in the conversation for all of the postseason awards right now, which I think is way too early to be doing that, but his numbers would bear that out. You're right. They're going to have to me, take away the run. The biggest issue, though, for Arizona's defense, Dwayne Akine referenced it this weekend as well, or this week, is the containment, right? There's too many explosive runs, too many of those chunk yardage plays that are going. And the challenge against this offense of Andy Ludwig is, A, they utilize their tight ends. They have a variety of different formations they can get to with the same personnel grouping. And they got a bunch of weapons. Like Dorian Singer, which every Arizona fan remembers, he's playing at a level like he was back in the day in Tucson, right? He's not the Dorian Singer we saw last year in a very crowded USC receiver room. And then I think from the quarterback decision, like a lot of times you want to heat up those young quarterbacks because you want to get the ball out of their hands. To me, I sometimes go the opposite way. I want to see Isaac Wilson hang on to the ball. Like, do they say, hey, let's drop 8 at times. Let's see if we can mix up early downs. We know third down, Dwayne Akina always has a plan, much like every coordinator on both sides of the ball. But the early downs, when I turn this game on Saturday night, I want to see how do they play Isaac Wilson. Because I do think he can read a flat defender on an RPO and get it out. I do think that he understands the intricacies of a half field read. Can you force him into full field reads? The only way to do that is to have great containment and a little bit of pressure with your three, guys in your three or four man front, whatever you want to employ on the defensive line. So that's to me going to be where this game is won or lost for Arizona is how do they force Isaac Wilson to make decisions? Is it quick, get the ball out? I think he's pretty good at that. Or is it hang on to it? Let me work through this thing. Let me force a couple. And if Arizona can get an early turnover, obviously it's a huge advantage for them on the road.
Yeah, I agree. I love that perspective. I just think you talked about the crowd in Salt Lake and how much of an impact they can make. I would say that if Arizona has any chance to win this game, they've got to flip the script and make the crowd almost an adversary for Isaac Wilson because of maybe they fall back by 14 points because the air attack is just clicking for Arizona. And then all of a sudden that crowd and the excitement starts to become a little bit of a worry and a panic, and you hear the moans and the groans in the crowd, and what kind of impact can that have on you when it was such a rabid fan base to begin the game. So I'm very curious to see that. I'm also very curious to see what kind of adjustments Arizona made in the bye week. And as we talked off camera before, Kansas State and Utah are two of the most consistent programs that you're going to see in the Big 12. And they approach things kind of similarly in terms of using their personnel in a variety of different ways, but they can use them in the same formations. And Kansas State's running game is one of the best in the country as well, especially with Avery Johnson. Now, Isaac Wilson is not Avery Johnson, but he can still scramble. And we saw that last week against Oklahoma State with a big 50-plus yard run down the left sideline. I want to see what kind of adjustments Arizona does. Do they bring maybe a Genesis Smith to come in off the bench and maybe attack as that kind of third or fourth linebacker, right? What kind of a pressure can they apply to force Utah to get a little bit out of their game? But as you mentioned, Keithy is such a weapon as a tight end, probably one of the best in the country, if you're asking me. The matchups just don't feel like they match up very well for Arizona.
Yeah, here's the thing that we have not seen yet from Utah this year. And historically, if you said, okay, what is the kink in the armor? It are down without Cam Rising, right? Cam Rising is a healthy starter. It's a record-setting number of yards offensively per game in the history of Utah football 2 years ago. We know what they were last year. We've seen them now in 2 games with Isaac Wilson as the starter. They're not the same offense, right? They beat, to me, it was a dominant game a week ago on the road State, but they did it in the run game, as you referenced with Mekhi Bernard and company. I think if I'm Arizona, this is truly execution on offense. We have not seen them play 4 quarters of football. We have not seen them be the efficient offense that we have come to expect with the experience at quarterback, the experience at wideout. And the offensive line is not what it was a year ago, but it's still, I think, a good offensive line, good enough to protect Fafita. So I want to see an efficient couple drives. If they can do that, that's, to me, how you take crowds out of the game. I don't think this Utah crowd is going to turn on Isaac Wilson. They know he's still a freshman. He's a home guy in the state. So even if he does struggle, they'll try to rally him in that community. But the way you quiet him, it's efficiency. It's boom, boom, third down conversion ahead of the sticks. If they can do that, they can get tight ends involved, other receivers involved. They can run the football with a little efficiency. I want to see the tight end Burnett, get him the rock moving a little bit in some matchups, especially if Karene Reed isn't playing. I think that's how Arizona can quiet the crowd. If they can do that and then put Isaac Wilson on his heels and say, okay, do I need to throw us back in this game? Because that's where Utah historically has always struggled. Down 2 scores, do they have power? I think they do with Cam Rising. I feel 100% confident if they're down 2 scores, he can find them back into this game through the throw game. Isaac Wilson, we just haven't seen it yet. And that, to me, would be the recipe of winning this game. Offensively, you have to be an execution-based outfit this weekend. And defensively, can you change up I would want the young quarterback to hold on to the ball in early downs. That's how I would play it. If I was calling this game, that's what I would anticipate. And then, of course, you're going to get exotic on third down, but you have to force him to think a little bit longer than 2.5 seconds.
So my feeling is this. I feel like Utah obviously is favored. The line is coming down, which is pretty crazy. And I feel like Utah should win this game. What I'm hoping for as an Arizona fan is that they play a good solid football game. And if you lose, you lose. That's fine. But we haven't seen Arizona put it together on both sides of the ball completely at all, like as you mentioned. My other thought is, how much of an impact can that bye week have? And I say that just because of this. This is a new coaching staff with Brent Brennan. And I think sometimes, especially in the first 3 weeks of the season, things are going so fast that you don't really have the time to be able to implement some of the adjustments at a high degree that you normally you wouldn't even have to really worry about because people have been in your program for so long, right? But this is all new. So I do wonder if that extra week of time gave them the opportunity to clean a lot of things up, really hone in on some of those details and those specifics. As Tate Smith, in Kansas was talking about how it's just the smallest little things with this team right now that they're just not triggering on that is causing massive problems for them. So I wonder if they were able to clean that stuff up. If so, I think this could be a competitive game. I expect it to be a more competitive game than people realize. That's just my perception. Am I being foolish in that assessment?
No, I don't think so. I mean, look, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I would bet if you did a study and looked at successful programs that had a new coach the following year, there are very few that are like Larry Coker at Miami back in the day when we were in college, right? It's just, to your point, there's a lot of newness. You can use the same language they had a year ago offensively. You can try different ways to make it, not seem new or different. But the reality is it is, right? Brent Brennan is not Jed Fish. And that's a good thing. He's not supposed to be Jed Fish. Like, he needs to be him. And he's a hell of a coach. He's as good of a culture builder I've ever seen. And I know how overused that word is. I'm trying to say it with a ton of discipline when it comes to what he's doing and how he's building it. They're navigating now what really good teams have to navigate after success, which is frustration. It's not about, Chris Peterson always says it, it's not reacting, it's responding, right? What we saw, in my opinion, against K-State with the frustration was a reaction to frustration. Now we get to see the response. What did they truly do? How are they going to respond to this game? And I think, to your point, they're going to play, I would anticipate, their best game of the season. Is it enough against a team that I think has a chance to make noise in the college football playoff? I don't know. I think Utah's a more complete team. I think I'm with you. I think Utah's, if I had to pick this game, I'd pick Utah to win it, especially at home. The team is driven by what happened in the last 39 seconds or whatever it was, 37 seconds from a year ago, albeit a different coaching staff, still the same roster. We know Kyle Whittingham and how he'll motivate. So I think Utah wins, but I think Arizona's got every shot in the world at being in this game. I don't think they need a 300-yard performance from T-Mac either. I think they need a little bit more complimentary football, and they create a couple turnovers. If they can do that, not give up explosive runs to Mekhi Bernard, not give up a special teams play like Utah has historically always made, they can do that. This game should go into the evening in Sac Lake City and come down to the last two possessions. And if it does, I'm going no Fafita in that regard. I don't know if it will, but if it's tight, I'd go to the experienced player offensively, especially if Isaac Wilson's the starter. All of this changes if Cam Rising comes on back and becomes the guy that we know him to be.
For sure. Right. Listen, it should be a fun one out at Rice-Eccles Stadium in Salt Lake City this weekend. Yogi, thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you guys follow the Y Option podcast. It's fantastic content. Yogi, you could tell them where can they follow you on Twitter as well?
Yeah, well, just go to yoption.com. All of our content is there. It's really easy. Put your email in and you'll get everything we do, every podcast, newsletter, players of the week, picks of the games, the whole 9 yards. We'll crush in that regard with Jim Thornby in our group. And then I'm just at Yogi Roth. I'll be all over the country. I have been all season, and trying to hopefully just continue to bring thoughtful dialogue around college football through the lens of the West Coast, which I think has been dramatically underrepresented. That's why I love what you guys are doing. I mean, you're doing that in a big way, and I love watching your success as well, man.
Appreciate it, man. Good luck in the future and all the stuff that you got going on as well. And until next time, folks, bear down.
We all silly like the mayor.